kid, I had a bit of an obsession about snakes. And I guess this story is about the end of that obsession. So we grew up in Charlotte, but sort of rural Charlotte, kind of outside in the county. And so we got to see a lot of snakes around. We had chickens, and so black snakes would get in and eat the chicken eggs and, have these big lumps in them. And they kind of squish them down. It's kind of cool. And sometimes the snakes would get into the house. I remember one time my mom opened I think it was a clothes washer, and stuck her hand in, and there was this snake in there, and somehow it got in there and it hissed at her, and she was freaked out for a long time about that. Probably connected to doing clothes. And we had a lot of pets. We had dogs and cats, and my mom was a preschool teacher, so we would end up with like hamsters and guinea pigs and rabbits and stuff like that for the summer. But we were never allowed to get a pet snake. And there was one summer, I think, when my cousin was like going out of the country, and he had this pet corn snake that was really cool. It was this like pretty orange snake. And he left it with us to take care of for the summer, and that was so great because you got to feed it little live mice and watch them get eaten. And I remember like we would like videotape the snake eating the mouse, and we'd play it back in slow motion and watch how it like jumped around again. Yeah, well, 3 boys, yeah. So then I think when it was probably junior high, it was probably the 8th grade. I was going to Piedmont Open Middle School, and this guy was coming with this sort of presentation called Snakes Alive, and some people might have heard of it. I think he traveled, I don't know how widely, but I think I've heard people say that he would come up like to Asheville sometimes, and he brought all these snakes, and he would do this presentation on snakes. So it was like the whole 8th grade went to the big auditorium, with like a full-size stage and everything. And he had like a little slideshow about snakes, and his main message was about how like you shouldn't be afraid of snakes, and most are not poisonous, and how to tell the poison ones from the non-poison ones, and how snakes are good because they eat mice and pests and stuff, and they're an important part of the ecosystem and all that. And then it came time to where he was going to pass out these snakes to let everybody hold the snakes, which was kind of wild. And he had a lot of them, and it was a big auditorium full of kids, so he was just passing out snakes. And some kids were like too scared to hold the snakes, and some were really excited, and all different kinds. And he was just kind of randomly, seemingly passing out snakes. And it seemed like, I had like an idea, like this is like kind of out of control, but it seemed to be going well. I guess he did it a lot. And one of the kids asked him if the snakes ever use the bathroom on anybody. And he said, well, like I've gotten good at feeding them several hours before a show, and then they can go to the bathroom, and so usually it doesn't happen. But with a group this big, every once in a while, there's so many snakes, it can happen. And so then then it was time to bring out Penelope, and he gathered up all the other snakes, and Penelope was this humongous python that he had like in a big rolling crate, and this thing was like, I think it was like that big around in the middle. It was a really big snake, and who knows if its conditions were like, what it would like for its life in this crate. But it was like, it did seem to be docile anyway. So he had a bunch of students line up all the way across the front of the stage and put their hands out like this, side, shoulder to shoulder. And he opened up the crate, and he just started feeding the snake out of the crate head first. And it kind of went down, everybody's arms, and this was like, and it stretched all the way across the base of the stage. It must have been like, I mean, it looked like, it must have been 50 feet, it looked like. You know, it was huge. And then people were kind of getting in line to take a turn to get to hold the snake, and people were lining up, and still there were a lot of kids that weren't holding the snake because it was so full of kids in the auditorium. And I wasn't holding the snake. I think I was waiting in line. And then I remember hearing this like splash, this huge splash of like liquid hitting the floor. And I looked up, and the snake was using the bathroom, Penelope. And like, I don't know, I don't think it's very common knowledge like what a snake does when it goes to the bathroom. And they're so small, like, you probably hardly notice, but like with a big snake, you notice. And Penelope was like, well, snakes, they're like solid and liquid waste, or like mixed, so it all just comes out at once. And it looked like big chunks of like cottage cheese and beer. And that was really what it looked like. And it smelled terrible, really, really bad. And it was just, I mean, maybe I'm inflating it in my head, but it was just like, there was so much. And there were just rivers, like it was just splashing and coming down in chunks, like hitting the floor. And I remember like kind of a river of like beer like flowing down in front of the stage. And like the kids, like most people started like screaming and running out of the auditorium. And like, and the guy was like trying to hold up the snake because there weren't enough kids to hold up. And he was like, help me hold up my snake! You know, and there were some kids that were like holding up the snake, like, looking real scared and just like standing their ground. And it was just complete chaos. And the kid that I think was closest to where it was all coming out, his name was Jason Allen, and he was one of those kids that, this was in the 80s, so he had these brand new Nike Air Jordans. And you know, these were like $100 shoes or whatever back then, like basketball shoes. And they were just, you know, like covered. And I remember hearing that the guy later gave him $5 because he felt bad, you know, he probably didn't have anything. But so that was the end of my obsession with snakes.